Welcome to the Board of Clackamas County Commissioners on this December 7, 2021, the County Administrator update and issues. Gary, you're up.
Thank you, Chair Smith. Commissioner Schrader is out of the office today. Commissioner Savas will be here shortly. First, County Courthouse draft budget note to the state legislature. Gary Barth, project manager for the courthouse, is here. We sent you a document yesterday. Apologize for the short notice, but this is due today, and this is something you knew the legislature asked for. I'm sorry, go ahead. Gary, please go ahead.
Good morning, Gary Barth, project manager for the courthouse. Thank you for squeezing us into the agenda. As you know, in 2021, the legislature authorized $94.5 million in bonds for the courthouse, but they established an expenditure limitation of $1. You'll remember the Clackamas Review headline, state approves $1 for a courthouse. That was pending a report that the Legislative Fiscal Office wrote up in a budget note to the House bill, asking Oregon Judicial Department, OJD, to provide a report to the Joint Committee on Ways and Means prior to the legislative session in 2022 to answer just a few clarifying questions. And then the intent is to have the legislative session in 2022 lift that dollar to the $94.5 million equal to the bond authorization. The report is to address 5 topics. Legal sufficiency is a P3, and this is all related to a P3 approach. That's what's unique with our courthouse. So what they want, is it legal? We had answered that question before we even went down this path with our own legal counsel, and we got Justice Department concurrence on that. Total cost of ownership. It's not something they've asked for on the other projects because the state's only contributing to the upfront capital cost. The county will maintain the building over those 30 years, but they still asked the question, so we still answered the question. So we gave them it would be similar to saying, what's your total cost of a full faith and credit bond over 30 years? It's like when you sign your mortgage statement, you take out a mortgage and then your closing statement shows the total cost of that. So we've included that in the report, along with our forecasted operations and maintenance expense, again, that the county will be paying. So we've addressed that issue. County ownership, that's critical to get state bonding. We also assured that we would retain ownership of the facility the entire time before we even pursued a P3. So that has been addressed legally, and concurrence from both the state and the county that we will retain ownership. And then they want a copy of the master funding agreement. County Counsel Nate Boderin from County Counsel, he and I have been working on these master funding agreements and phase agreements with the state. They've got Nate's draft. They're supposed to be getting it back to us in the next week or so. That will be an accompaniment to this budget report. And then the final is a long-term flow of funds in and out of the Occcif fund. And that's an accounting issue. So I won't bore you with the details, but the way they're set up today is it's a pay-as-you-go. So in a design build, you put money into a construction fund, you pull it out, pay that month's invoices, submit that to the state and to the Occcif. We pull it back out of there, then they give us a 50% contribution. So that's the pay-as-you-go approach. But in a P3, neither one of us pays until the project's done. So there's really no need to deposit and withdraw out of this fund. It's a one-time. But they have said that the current legislative language, they think, requires us to make that deposit of our availability payments in and out of that fund over 30 years. But we've all agreed we will do that if that's what you believe the language is. But the better approach is we'll go back in 2023 and get the language cleaned up to accommodate a P3. They've all said that the Occcif never intended to preclude a P3. It's just when they set up the accounting procedures, they didn't allow for it. So
because they didn't know it? They didn't know about a P3? Gary, maybe they weren't aware that a P3 existed out there?
They actually knew because the OJD actually considered putting the whole courthouse, Occcif, under a P3 model before they even launched it years ago.
Oh.
So they were aware, but just no other county had pursued it.
Okay.
I think many others will follow our lead. So the timeline was we wanted to get a draft report to the Legislative Fiscal Office on 12/13. So we all agreed that 12/6 would be a good deadline. I submitted the initial draft in August. We got their draft back last Wednesday night. So I had one business day to review it. So we did that, got it done over the weekend, and got all of our comments in, and that's the draft you see with you today. So we'll be sending that back to OJD after this meeting. I just wanted you to see the red line draft before it went to OJD and the LFO.
I read through that, and maybe the rest of the folks did too. They're concerned about us owning the building and the parcel, I understand. They're concerned about any other liens. I think you've addressed all of their concerns. I think these concerns probably came up during the legislative session, am I correct?
It did.
Yes, and
It didn't come from staff, it came from the legislative
Yeah,
session.
well, that's fine, I understand. I mean, they have the right to, it's a big deal, right? And any commissioners have any questions, comments? Paul?
Yeah, I do. I just want to I made this request or inquiry before, is that, I'll make a statement first. I really thought that we would have on staff an expert or a legal attorney who is experienced with P3s to guide us through some of these decisions. And whenever we come up with a decision, I would certainly like to have that legal presence here. So who is that person?
We actually,
Gary wants to
Commissioner, we
answer.
do have that. Hawkins, Delafield and Wood, New York office has been our legal consultants working with county counsel from the get-go. They're one of the leading P3 legal firms in the country.
Are they here today?
They're not here today, but
That's my request. When it comes to a decision point, I want to have that guidance.
well, this isn't a legal contract. This is just a budget report from OJD that they asked for county's input on. But it's OJD's staff report to the legislature.
I'm not sure you're hearing what I'm saying.
Who's our internal staff? Is it Nate Boderman?
Nate Boderman.
Would you like us to get him real quick for this discussion, Commissioner?
Well, I think he should be part of all of these.
Okay.
That's my point.
Nate was certainly involved in all the drafting and the language and the redlining. I just offered to come and just present this morning because there was really there was no decision points or decision-making. We weren't.
But you're asking us to forward this on to the OJD.
No, staff is just going to forward. There's no approval decision needed by the board. This is more of an FYI.
Okay.
The legislature just asked us to clarify, and it's things we've already reviewed with you before you even approved us to move forward on a P3.
This is a
We're just trying to get them
result of-
up to speed.
Gary, this is a result of a legislative budget note.
Correct.
Correct, that said, at a certain amount of time, Clackamas County will report back and answer these questions.
OJD will report back with county's input.
Okay,
Yeah.
so we submit this to OJD, who then reports to the legislature on the status of this project.
Correct.
Did our other outside counsel take a look at this document?
They
too?
did.
All right.
Over the weekend, we had all three P3 consultants review this.
So Gary, are we going to wait for Nate, or what do you want to do on this? We can hold this off and come back to it later?
We come back here I just texted him. I think he could be here in a second. We could move on to another item and come right back to it, if that's okay.
Somebody just walked by.
I could wrap up a couple of quick
Oh,
things.
Oh, yeah, and then
Sorry.
I just have a question,
Yeah.
whenever it's appropriate.
So we had, just as an update, we had the Legislative Fiscal Office staff and OJD staff here on campus about a month ago. We
Oh.
toured the old courthouse, we toured this courthouse, and we had a work session on this report, just to make sure. Is Amanda Bytel, she's the director of the LFO. And just to make sure, Amanda wrote the budget notes, we wanted to make sure that we were answering Amanda's questions. So Amanda gave us a good thumbs up, said, nope, this looks good the way you're approaching this. And so she's anticipating this. She's the one who'll get it on the 13th. And then if she has any comments, and then after that, it'll get finalized and presented to the Joint Committee on Ways and Means on January 13th in advance of the session. And then the session will, we anticipate approval on 3/7 of the expenditure. So that's kind of the timeline we've got here.
So March 7th.
March 7th, during that short session.
Shall I go ahead and ask my question?
Yeah, go ahead, Sonia.
Okay. First of all, thank you for this. It's been a long project coming. So I actually really appreciated reviewing the memo and just all of the detail that is there. I think it is very thorough and should, since I participated in one of the public hearings before the committee and hearing those questions, I really, really appreciate this.
That's right, you were there side by side.
I was
did that.
there. One thing I would appreciate, there are attachments that are referred to here, and I don't need to see them now. I know they're documents that we have seen as a commission before, but if they could all just be in one place that I can just refer back.
Yeah, once we get the final
Just to
draft
get
going to
that to us
LFO, we'll
with
put the whole package
with the
together.
exhibits, that would be wonderful. I would really appreciate that.
You saw one note on the exhibit, they had put project agreement draft in there, and I struck that. I'm going to replace it with a term sheet because the project agreement drafts are confidential. We're in a competitive procurement process right now, and they're only available to the 3 project teams that are competing and internal staff. So we don't want that draft agreement to be out there circulating in a public.
Nate Boderman is online, he's on Zoom, so Mary will bring him into the Zoom room, and then any questions you have, commissioners, for Nate. Go ahead.
And I have completed mine, so whatever Nate wraps up.
Nate, are you there?
I am.
Great. Commissioner Savas, just wanted to make sure, did you review the budget note to the legislature that staff has presented? I know we have an external consultant that does legal work, but you're our in-house expert. Did you have any input concerns you'd like to share? And then Commissioner Savas may have a question.
No concerns. I mean, most of the edits that we had were, I would characterize as editorial. Most of the language that the judicial department had used to characterize the nature of our negotiations, we softened up a bit. But everything was accurate. I mean, this is frankly a lot of information that the legislature had at the time, but we're just highlighting it and clarifying it for them through this report. So no concerns on the substance.
So Nate, just one question. So you might be the very same thing, but have you reviewed the packet materials and the presentation by Mr. Barth this morning?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, that was all stuff that we had worked on this weekend with our consultants, yes.
Great, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay, so Gary, do we need to have a motion on this?
I don't think a
I don't think
motion
so.
is
It's just
necessary. We just want to
informational.
make sure you saw this before it goes to the legislature, so you're not surprised. You could offer any input. So just head nod is all that's needed, please.
Okay. Any objections to this moving forward?
Gary, are you going to hand walk it down to Salem?
Am I going to hand walk
He's
it?
got to go down there today, you said?
He's going to walk
You're going to make sure you
45
get
miles.
it today?
I think I might slow walk it a little bit. No,
You could-
we'll
you
get
could-
it to them as
You
soon
could-
as possible.
You could ride your bike.
Could ride my bike.
Thank you, Gary, very much. Next, Commissioners' Emergency Declaration Recommendation on Wildfire Debris. Daniel Neibauer, Interim Director, Disaster Management, please come forward. He did submit a memo to you and what the resolution would look like. Daniel, go ahead.
Good morning, Commissioners. We discussed this last week at Issues regarding the recommendation of extending this wildfire debris declaration through the beginning of August to allow for cleanup of hazardous trees along the right-of-way. And this will keep that emergency condition through that point in time, allowing us to have our contractors and work with the Oregon Department of Transportation to do that work.
And you want to extend it until August 1st of 2022?
That is correct by your direction.
Any questions for Daniel on this?
I just have I don't have any quarrel at all. I'm okay with extending it. My only concern I have, I raised it last year, and last year certainly doesn't appear to be as wet as this year, and that is slides, runoff, and all the things that toxic materials and so forth. So I'm sure that probably included in here, embedded in here somehow.
A lot of the work on cleaning up the toxic material was done on the private property debris removal, which is portion. Unfortunately, there is still going to be lots of runoff that are down there, and I know that both the state and our water providers are, monitoring the water for any of that and do that. But the state and the feds have had a BEAR team, a burnt area environmental, I can't remember the last R, team that goes through and looks at all the contamination and where landslides are probable. And National Weather Service also works with us and sends us weekly warnings on any areas that may have a particular landslide or danger there. So there's not work being done to remove that, but there is work to be monitoring that and monitoring the growth
Okay.
coming back.
Related to that is, if there is, let's say, a substantial slide or something that damages a road or something like that, are we still eligible for FEMA relief?
It would be, if it was a separate disaster, it would not be continuous with this disaster. It would be a separate one, and it would depend on the magnitude and the impacts.
Okay, thank you.
Okay. Any other questions or comments? I believe I need a motion on this one.
I would say no motion, but we'll put it on your business meeting agenda
Okay.
as soon as this Thursday, if you like, or next Thursday, and that's where you'll formally approve. Is this Thursday okay?
Yes.
Daniel, are you ready for this Thursday?
Certainly can be.
Excellent. We'll add it to this Thursday's agenda, and that's where you will approve it. Okay, great. Thank you. Daniel, next, Business Recovery Grants Update. Sarah Eckman, Interim Director of Business Community Services. She also had a memo in your packet. Sarah, please come forward.
Good morning, Chair Smith, Commissioners. My name is Sarah Eckman. I'm the Interim Director with Business and Community Services for the county. I brought an issue forward this morning I'd like to check in with you on. So earlier this year, you approved our use and plan for distribution of $2.7 million, which was CARES funds we received from the state of Oregon through the Department of Administrative Services. As part of that package, we had a plan for up to $300,000 of a utility bill relief program. As we've been exploring that and negotiating to put contracts in place to carry that out, we ran into some issues that ultimately resulted in it not being possible. The funding for this DAS grant to the county does end at the end of this month. And so we have about $228,000 that's currently unused, and are proposing that we amend our agreement with Micro Enterprise Services of Oregon to allow them to use those remaining dollars to fund 31 more grants at $7,500 apiece. We do have an agreement in place already with MISO for about $2.3 million in grants. There are still business applicants in this pool who have not been funded due to lack of funding. And so this is a way that we can fully expend the state CARES dollars and still benefit our business community in a short turnaround situation. So with your blessing and approval of that, we are drafting the agreement in the background and would bring it forward to you as soon as it's ready.
Commissioner Scholl?
Yes. On your idea for the 31 grants at $7,500 each, we had some applicants for the small grants program here a few months ago, and some applicants didn't receive any help. And some of these organizations are providing critical assistance to our people in the way of food and that sort of thing. Who came up with those 34 grants, and can we find out who you recommend that they go to?
Yes, so we had a grant application round back in June where we opened it up to business owners who had eligible costs they incurred due to COVID and the impacts of the pandemic. So we had over 500 applicants at that time. The pool that we're talking about funding from is strictly from that pool, so it would be separate from the small grants program. So all these business owners have articulated and substantiated that they incurred costs mostly from the opening and closing and adjusting to the requirements of the pandemic. And so we've just kind of incrementally been trying to fund as many of those applicants as we can, because there's still a great need for that cash within the business community.
And can we see who those 31 grants are?
We can. I will have to ask our partner to pull who would be next on the list. They're basically going down the list, and they have used some criteria in the past. So far, the criteria that have prioritized the list have been people who've not received a grant before from us.
Yeah, okay.
And then owners who are either minority, veteran, or woman-owned of those businesses. But as we get further and further down the list, it opens up the possibilities more. We are getting close to funding all the applicants, but there's still, I think, at least 100 who have not received grant awards.
And you got to commit this $228,000 by the end of the December?
Yes, December
Okay.
31st.
Paul?
Are any of those nonprofits?
They were eligible to apply, so I can ask MISO who's on the list. There were nonprofits on the list. Some of them may have already been funded.
Okay. Just want to just recognize that there are some nonprofits, and, I appreciate knowing they're eligible, but I don't know if they were informed or aware that they could. So you just want to make sure that we're covering
Yes, yeah.
all those that suffered, because they are still, businesses or nonprofits or whatever they may be, employees or employees. And so the welfare of all those is important, especially if they're minority-owned, whatnot.
It is. We will be able to provide a list of everybody who's funded once it's settled. I heard from MISO yesterday, so with the earlier funding, we were able to fund 311 businesses. There's 34 of them who they've contacted on multiple occasions who have not responded. And so they're asking for our go-ahead to go to the next 34. So that would get us to that point, and then adding these 31 as well. So we would be,
Yeah.
but we will have a list of who all is funded once it's settled.
Okay, I have one other question, and that is related to this, but not really this particular one, but close. And that is that between the CARES Act and the ARPA recovery dollars that we helped small businesses or businesses with, recently, last week, I heard that the North Clackamas Chamber, for example, has basically distributed out $193,000 to the BRCs, for example. And I know that there's a number of chambers in the county. But I do know that between these two programs collectively, there's a lot more dollars that went out. So I would just like to know, maybe get a, not today, but if you get that to me in the coming days, I'd appreciate it. Just to know just how much assistance we've given or helped provide to small businesses, nonprofits, and so forth as a result of CARES Act, and also as a result of the ARPA money we just recently committed here, I think a few weeks ago, to that.
Certainly. Yeah, we used to say it was more than $5 million in grants. With this addition, it'll be, roughly $7.5 million. But we'll get you some final numbers.
Okay. Great.
Sarah, you say there's a great need for cash in the business community. And
Yes.
so what kind of businesses are asking, want to apply for this, or applied and didn't get denied because we didn't think we had enough money?
There is a wide variety of businesses. We see a lot of storefront type businesses. And so businesses who had to adjust according to the matrix from the state were most often who we see. So it was restaurants, but we had healthcare businesses who are providing everything from chiropractic care, physical therapy, things along those lines. We've had many others, and I could get you a more comprehensive list of the different
Well, I'm
business
just
types.
curious of what kind of businesses, are affected. Restaurants, certainly, they really
Yeah.
had to comply with the metrics.
Gyms were very impacted.
Gyms,
Places where they either had to close or significantly alter operations, and also lost a lot of membership and revenue.
and are they having trouble with a workforce? Do you know?
Yes. So, two things we hear. We hear that business owners have depleted significant resources to get through the pandemic, and that extends into their personal finances. Oftentimes, they've fully leveraged themselves to be able to remain afloat. I had a business owner the other day tell me she spent, $25,000 of her savings to get through the pandemic, which was pretty significant. But we do hear there's workforce issues as well, that businesses are having a hard time hiring and retaining employees right now, as well as we see when we're out and about, that businesses are understaffed and, asking for grace. If you go to a restaurant, oftentimes you notice they don't have as many staff as they used to.
Any questions for Sarah? And Gary, what's the action needed on this?
So if you approve, Sarah, do you need to come back to the board on a consent agenda for the MISO contract?
Yes, and
Can
it
you
is
do
being
it this week? Like
prepared.
2 days?
I can check on that. It may need to be next week.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's fine, as long as the
Do we
money
need a
gets out.
motion, or are we good?
I think no motion necessary, because we'll bring it to you on consent agenda.
Okay.
Just a question, if it comes next week, is there going to be enough time? Because that would be 2 weeks to get the money out the door.
Yes, thanks. It's a great question. We have talked with our partner, and they said yes. The good part is, and the reason we wanted to do this, is they have everything prepped and ready to go. So in checking in with the state, we need to obligate the funds to the businesses by the end of the year. So we have a little bit of leeway, as long as we have all of that work done. and they've assured us they can do that.
Okay, 'cause
We
that's
are-
not a lot of time.
It's not. We'll push for this week, but we still need to get that contract.
I would feel better if it were this week, just in my comfort level, because I hate not, when there are businesses in need, us not being able to execute.
Right, absolutely. Yeah, our team's definitely working on it. Started yesterday.
I recommend doing whatever it takes, internal too, if our finance and county council could assist to get it done.
Certainly.
By this Thursday, please.
We can do that.
Thank you. All right.
Okay, thank
Very
you.
good. Thank you, Sarah. Chair, with your permission, may we do the consent agenda items next, please?
Certainly.
Okay, we'll start. Housing Authority of Clackamas County. Please come forward. First, approval of a board order to write off uncollectible accounts for the second quarter of fiscal year 2022. Total loss is $2,329.70. No general funds are involved. We have Rod Cook and Tony Carter. Go ahead, please.
Yes, the first contract. As a business practice, the Housing Authority writes off debts after 90 days of collection efforts. Former residents in public housing that have debts that are written off continue to be tracked and are reported to a federal government database that prohibits their participation in any other public housing program nationally until such debt is paid. Of the total second quarter write-offs, $912.14 was for uncollected rents, and $1,417.56 was for maintenance repairs charged to the tenants. I think we've been before this board before on a similar write-off.
Yes.
Any questions?
No?
All right.
Any objections?
No? Okay. Number two, approval of an amendment extending the intergovernmental agreement between the Housing Authority of Clackamas County and Clackamas County Social Services for 6 months and adding $55,000 for case management for program participants. The new contract value is $280,000. This is funded entirely with county general funds, which has already been budgeted within H3S Affordable Housing and Services.
Yes, this contract funds a full-time case manager for residents of the Housing Authority programs. Housing Authority program clients are selected from the wait list. Many are homeless and/or have high barriers and therefore are in need of intensive case management to be successfully housed. So this is just a continuance of that relationship that Housing Authority has with social services to provide that service.
Did I hear this was a new position, or is this just a backfilling or whatever you call it?
Yeah, this is an ongoing reestablishment of a current program and FTE we have in place.
Thank you for that. Any other comments for the presenters today? Seeing none, thank
All
you.
right. Item three, approval to execute a construction contract with A1 Quality Construction for on-demand services for removing and replacing flooring in public housing units. Total maximum contract value is $250,000, funded through HUD federal capital grant funds. No county general funds are involved.
Yes, and A1 Quality Construction was selected through a competitive request for proposal process. The scope of work includes full and partial repair and replacement of flooring in public housing units. The last 2-year contract resulted in work to 44 different units. No county general
Any
fund.
comments or questions for the presenters? Any objections? Hearing none?
All right, thank you, Rod and Tony. If you don't mind, I'm going to jump ahead to Health, Housing, Human Services, so you can stay here, Rod. All right. Health, Housing, Human Services. One, approval of an amendment to a revenue contract with Trillium Community Health Plan for certain behavioral health services. Amendment adds $192,000 for a new maximum value, contract value of $942,000, funded through Oregon Health Plan funds. No county general funds are involved.
Yes, this contract would provide funds for behavioral health clinic, behavioral health crisis, behavioral health intensive care coordination, wraparound care coordination, choice care coordination, and peer and community-based services. No county general funds are involved in this particular contract.
Any questions or objections?
I just have a quick question.
Yes.
So we have 2 CCOs in the county. One's Trillium and the other is Health Share. And I'm just curious how this works. Are these funds from Trillium just for Trillium clients?
Yes, I'm actually on Health Share's board, so I'm going to base it on how their relationship, so it would
Okay.
be for their clients, yes. And so you probably have a similar thing happening with Health Share for their clients.
For Trillium, you mean?
Trillium would have theirs and HealthShare would have theirs.
Okay, so this probably, because there was a big concern when they went to 2 CCOs instead of 1, because it's just more continuity and easy systems and administration. I was just curious, and I can find out later, but this triggers this for me. We're going to have a talk later, I know. Maybe we can talk about administratively. I'm interested to know how much more challenging this is for us to administer these kinds of behavioral health services.
Okay.
To be discussed later, Rod. Thank you.
Any other comments or objections? Seeing none.
Item 2, approval of a contract with Cambridge Consultants for EMS System Planning Services. Maximum contract value is $152,200, funded through EMS System Enhancement Funds. No county general funds are involved.
Yes, Cambridge Consultants will provide EMS system planning services to achieve the goal of reviewing, modernizing, and updating the ambulance service plan, County Code, Title 10, Chapter 10. So basically, this is our consultant to help us through that process.
Any questions or comments, objections? Seeing none.
Item 3, approval of an intergovernmental agreement with Sandy Fire District for COVID vaccine administration. Contract maximum value is $150,000, funded through ARPA and FEMA funding. No county general funds are involved.
Yes, and we're about to go through several of these, but so I'll read the full on the first, and then I'll just give you the specific fire department that we're working with. But basically, Clackamas County partners with local fire agencies to conduct COVID-19 testing and distribute COVID vaccine via community clinics based on guidelines established by the Oregon Health Authority. This first one, agreement establishes a relationship with Sandy Fire District. And we'll have 4 similar ones that I'll just mention the fire district, if that's okay.
Any objections to this? Seeing none.
Item 4, what Rod just described, this one is for the Malala Fire District for COVID vaccines, $150,000, funded through ARPA and FEMA. No county general funds.
Yes,
Same.
For Malala Fire.
Okay. Item 5, same agreement with Hoodland Fire District, also for $150,000.
Yes, Hoodland Fire.
And
Number 6, same thing with Clackamas Fire District for COVID response, also for $150,000.
Clackamas, and one more.
Next, number 7, same thing for Canby Fire District for COVID vaccine administration, also for $150,000. That's the final one for that.
Any questions or comments from any commissioner on reimbursement for, Shoal, you have something?
I have a question
You
on
can
this.
put your sign down.
This is a maximum contract value of $150K each. The money that's not used by each of these fire districts, what happens to that money? Does it come back to us to reallocate it under ARPA funds?
I'd have to check on that. Most of the contracts I'm familiar with are, you basically have to show that you've actually had expenditures that you can
Right,
post to
yeah.
that. So that's my assumption, but
Yeah.
let me get you specifics on
I can
that.
answer that, yes, it comes back.
Yeah,
If they don't
okay.
sp- It's on call, so they only use what they spend. If they
Got
don't
it.
spend it,
Oh, good,
it's saved
okay.
here at the county.
Thank you,
Okay,
thank you,
very
Gary.
good. All right, Commissioner Fisher?
Yeah, I'm noticing the funding is through ARPA and FEMA. Do you know how that's broken down?
I do not, but I can get that for you, see which mix went to which contract. I'm sure it's based on the specific contract, how they pieced it together.
Okay, and was the ARPA designation out of the bulk of just the public health response? Do we know?
Actually, I don't know. Is this the money the board has authorized for public health, or is this separate that came to the county? Daniel, do you know? Putting you on the spot? No. All right. We'll have to get back to you on that, Commissioner.
Yeah, that would be great.
Yeah.
Because I think as a board, we need to be uber accountable for our ARPA expenditures. And so if there was ARPA money from the state, that could have come through OHA, that could have come to us, it could be. Because I do know that we had talked about some public health, and I just don't know. But I do want, if it doesn't, like Commissioner Schull, you actually got me thinking about this. If it isn't expended and it is our ARPA dollars, then I would like it to go back to our flexible ARPA, just to make sure that that's
Yeah,
possible.
I'll get some clarity on that, because you're right, funds are coming from multiple directions on this.
Okay,
All right, good. Item 8, approval of an amendment to a ground lease between Clackamas County Development Agency and Clackamas County for the property located at 16575 Southeast 115th Avenue for the continued site use for the Veterans Village program. No county general funds are involved.
Yes, this is basically to ensure that a location is available to continue operations of the successful Veterans Village program. This amendment extends the existing lease as H3S continues to assess options and opportunities for additional transitional services.
Is this a yearly renewal of a lease, or what's the time on it?
This is the one where it gives us one more year with an option to go to additional year. This is the piece that Dan and I presented to you in issues about a week ago, I believe.
Thank you, thank you. Any objections to this? Seeing none?
Item 9, approval of an amendment extending the intergovernmental agreement between the Housing Authority of Clackamas County and Clackamas County Social Services for 6 months, adding 55, is this the same item? Adding 55,000 for case management. Is this a duplication or a different one?
It's not a duplication. One is giving the money from HAC to social services, and this is social
Oh, yes,
services
yes, I
accepting the money
apologize.
from HAC.
Correct, thank you. All right, let me read it again. Approval of an amendment extending the intergovernmental agreement between the Housing Authority of Clackamas County and Clackamas County Social Services for 6 months, adding $55,000 for case management for program participants. New total contract value is $280,000, funded entirely with county general funds, which has already been budgeted within the H3S budget of affordable housing and services.
Yes, and I kind of just said what's happening here. It's basically, since HAC is a separate type of entity, we have to do this transfer to show you that the money coming in and the money going out.
Objections? Oh, Sonia,
No,
question.
sorry.
All right,
bad.
very good. Thank you, Rod.
Okay.
So I'm going to go backwards on the agenda. I apologize, Commissioners. Development Agency. Dan, please come forward. Approval of an amendment to the ground lease between Clackamas County Development Agency and Clackamas County pertaining to the property located at 16575 Southeast 115th Avenue for the continued site use for the Veterans Village Program. No county general funds are involved. You just heard about this. This is the both sides here. Very good. We're doing our work well, Commissioners. Go ahead, Dan.
Not really sure what I'm going to add to that. Basically, this is the partnering agreement with the information you just heard from H3S. Allows the board to authorize not only the approval from the H3S side, but also from the development agency side.
Okay, any questions or objections? Seeing none, thank you, Dan.
Very good. All right. Thank you. Now back on the agenda to Finance Department. I apologize, Commissioners, to get it out of order there, but I want to be respectful of staff who was coming up. It was Finance Department. Item 1, we're actually pulling item 1. At least that's what I heard from your staff, Elizabeth. Did you know that? Sandra emailed this morning asking to pull the item 1 on extension. Did you know that? You agree with that?
No, actually, I'm prepared to talk about the extension supplemental budget.
Okay, never mind. So item 1, approval of a resolution for extension and 4-H service district supplemental budget, less than 10% in transfers for fiscal year 2021-2022. The supplemental budget increases appropriations by $16,500, funded through interest income. No county general funds are involved. Elizabeth Comfort and Jeff Jorgensen are here.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. This is a supplemental budget. It's less than 10%, so this just requires a consent agenda and your approval during a regular business meeting. The supplemental budget is to increase interest expense cost because their dollars have increased due to, this is the OSU extension dollars. They've been building a reserve for a potential new building site, and so we've not started that work yet, so their dollars are still accumulated and they're still being held and invested by our Treasury Department. So these dollars are additional interest expense to manage those dollars by the investments that the Treasury does.
Any questions or objections? Seeing none.
All right, item 2, approval of a parking lot space lease agreement between Facilities Management and Eddington Properties for the lease of 9 courthouse staff parking spaces located at 713 Main Street, Oregon City. This is funded through current department allocations, some of which do include county general funds. Go ahead, Jeff.
Morning. Yeah, this is a simple lease of just parking spaces that it was agreed upon basically back in 2013 when we constructed the Sallyport. We lost parking spaces, so county administration agreed to go ahead and pay for 7 of those. Then we have 1 for the DA, 7 for state courts, 1 for the DA, and 1 for the law library of those 9. We're just codifying and making sure we've got all the leases in line, making sure we're legal on all aspects.
Any questions or objections? Sonia?
This isn't located near the sinkhole, is it?
It is not. It is on the other side of the verdict in those other lots.
Just checking.
Yes.
Have you heard any update on the sinkhole, Jeff?
It is still static.
It's still
I was going to
sinking,
send
right?
out an email today, basically. It has not moved, it has not grown, no change so far.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, thank you. Next, county administration. Item 1, approval of an intergovernmental agreement between Clackamas County Equity and Inclusion, between Clackamas County and the City of Lake Oswego. The City of Lake Oswego is contributing $30,000 in support of the contract with the Coalition of Communities of Color for Racial Research Justice Study. This is a reimbursement. No county general funds are involved. Martine Koblenz, County Equity and Inclusion Officer, will present. Go ahead.
Hi, thank you. Good morning, Commissioners. So this is the project that you approved back in May for the racial research justice work with the Coalition of Communities of Color. And as Gary said, this is a reimbursement to the total cost of the project is $300,000. And we have 4 of these. So the first one is Lake Oswego, contributing $30,000.
So as we promised, Commissioners, we have raised over $160,000 in contributions from other local jurisdictions. So that means the county is only paying $140,000 of this contract.
Approximately, yep.
So this is the first one, $30,000 from Lake Oswego.
Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I just want to say this is just an example of working together in the partnerships with the cities to help defray costs. So I appreciate that. I also appreciate the cities that have stepped forward in supporting this program so that it's similar to our housing assessment that we did with the cities to save money and do it cooperatively and actually get more data, more relatively data out of it. So kudos.
Thank you.
Sonia?
I'm just curious about the time frame and when will the study be completed and when will we be briefed? Like how much longer do we
I can come back with an update on the study more specifically, but the time frame is about the early January 2023, so it's a couple-year project. But I can come back with an update on where we're at so far.
That'd be great.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Okay. Seeing no objections?
Very good. Item 2, approval of an intergovernmental agreement between Clackamas County and Portland General Electric. Portland General Electric is contributing $45,000 in support of the Coalition of Communities of Color contract. This is a reimbursement. No county general funds are involved.
So it's the same.
Same?
Yep.
Yeah. What a surprise.
Yeah, okay.
Isn't that great?
Okay.
Go ahead.
There's more. Item 3, intergovernmental agreement between Clackamas County and the City of Oregon City. The City of Oregon City is contributing $8,000 in support of the Coalition of Communities of Color project. And this is a reimbursement. No county general funds are involved.
Okay. And we want to finish them all?
Item 4, intergovernmental agreement between Clackamas County and Clackamas Community College. Clackamas Community College is contributing $15,000 in support of the contract with the Coalition of Communities of Color. This is a reimbursement. No county general funds are involved.
I will entertain comments or questions at this time for these 4 reimbursements.
Chair,
Yes.
I'd like to just say thank you to Lake Oswego, thank you to PGE, thank you to Oregon City, and thank you to Clackamas County Community College for this generous
Right.
contribution to this effort.
Very nice indeed.
I did want to say that we had other cities contribute. There are smaller amounts that our county administrator can approve. But so
Okay.
I will send you the full list once we have all of this finalized.
Okay.
Yeah.
Great.
And there are a few more big dollar ones still to come.
Yeah,
That they'll
still-
be coming
yep.
for you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you, Martine. Next, Business and Community Services. Item 1, approval of an amendment to the Memorandum of Understanding between Clackamas County and Hoodland Women's Club. This amendment extends the time to transfer properties from Clackamas County to a local park district upon its formation. Should it be formed, no fiscal impact beyond ongoing operational and maintenance costs incurred by business and community services while the land is under Clackamas County ownership. Sarah Eckman, go ahead.
Thank you. Hello again. Yes, this extension amends the agreement we have with the Hoodland Women's Club and extends the date to December 31st, 2022, which is how long we agree to hold the properties in surplus that would eventually be transferred to them in the successful formation of the park district. So currently, our agreement extends through May of 2022. This would give them through December of 2022.
Okay, Paul?
Related question, do we know the status of the petition? I do know, I think the deadline for petitions was 18th, and I think you have 3 weeks in elections to do the count and validate the signatures. Do you know if we met that yet, or?
I do not. I would have to check back
Okay.
with the team and see.
Stephen,
Any
do you know?
staff that's listening, I'd love to know what the status is that is.
Okay.
We will get you an update.
Thank you.
Commissioner Scholl?
Well, I was just going to say, I know they got the signatures and they submitted them, so I think that was like a week or so ago.
Yeah.
So hopefully it'll come through and they'll get it on the ballot.
Great, we'll get an update to you, Commissioner.
Thank you.
All right, thanks, Sarah. Next, disaster management. Item 1, approval of an amendment to an intergovernmental agreement with the Oregon Department of Transportation for right-of-way wildfire damaged hazard tree removal. No county general funds are involved. Daniel?
Interim Director of Disaster Management, Daniel Nybauer. The substantive changes in this amendment for the county is to provide temporary decking sites for logs before their sale or disposal, and that's ODOT will retain ownership of those logs. The option for property owners to keep logs that are cut down in the right-of-the-way at no cost to them if they choose. The option for property owners to request that trees beyond the right-of-way can also be surveyed and potentially removed, and that would be 1.5 times the height of the tree, just to make sure that the roadway stays safe if the property owner wants that to be done. If they don't, then it will not. And recognition of the possibility that some of the logs will be donated for use by local nonprofits in stream protection or restoration progress. So we're just updating the IGA since we're moving into the stage of the right-of-way tree removal. There is no cost to the county. ODOT is removing the trees as well as covering the 25% match that FEMA charges. So,
Any questions or comments? Seeing none.
Thank you. Next, Transportation Development. 1, approval of a contract with Hart Krauser for the Transportation Earthquake Preparation and Response Plan Project. Maximum contract value is $168,185, funded through county road funds. No county general funds are involved. Dan Johnson, Director of Transportation and Development. Go ahead.
Thank you so much. The contract before you will update the county's understanding of the earthquake vulnerabilities of the identified emergency transportation routes we have throughout the county. Essentially, it will look to identify cost-effective pre-disaster mitigation options, develop a prioritized list of improvements to the emergency transportation routes and bridges to improve the resiliency of our systems, and develop a checklist and procedures to be used by county staff for assessment of roads and bridges immediately following an earthquake. For those of you who aren't familiar, we have extensive emergency transportation routes throughout the county. These are pre-designated routes. I believe we have somewhere in the neighborhood of 186 bridges along those routes. So this will be taking a look at not only the bridges, but also a discussion around the roads themselves.
Wow, interesting. I like the work. How long do you think it'll take to do this?
I have to get back to you on that.
No
Right now, the
problem.
duration of the contract rolls through June 30th of 2023, so I'm assuming they're
I would-
expecting to use all that time.
Yeah, well, I would think it would be a long time to do this. Commissioner Scholl.
Yes, Dan, are all counties doing a study like this at their own expense?
I can't say all. I can say the discussion started through an effort from the Oregon Department of Transportation a number of years ago, where they actually went out and engaged in discussions with counties around their system and to see if there were redundant systems that parallel to it. So for example, if there was a freeway with a bridge there, did we have parallel routes that weren't ODOT facilities but were county facilities? And was it cheaper to maybe make our facilities more resilient? But I know that there are a number that are taking this action.
So this wasn't directed by the state for us to do this at our own expense?
I don't believe so. I'd have to follow up and confirm that with you.
Okay. I appreciate that.
I mean, we are taking proactive measures as it comes to resiliency of all of our road systems. And this is one of a number of efforts that we've been doing recently to get a better understanding of what our system is, what weaknesses we have in the system, and how to improve those efficiently and effectively. So,
Thanks,
but I will get back to you.
Yeah, this is important work. Thank you. Any objections to this going forward? Seeing none.
Item 2, approval of a board order vacating a portion of an unnamed, non-maintained local access road created in 1913 through Sunshine Valley Orchard Tracks, northwesterly of Boring, Oregon. There is no financial impact.
Thank you so much. In 1913, somebody thought it was a great idea to put a right-of-way on a very steep section of a hillside. This is basically the right-of-way before you today. We have had a request come in from petitioners with 100% support of all the abutting property owners to vacate this right-of-way that was established for some reason in 1913. There is no improved road there currently. It is simply a right-of-way that for public use. We have informed all of our counterparts about this vacation. There is complete support for its approval by the Board of County Commissioners.
So where does the ownership go?
So we have an easement over their fee simple property. So essentially,
is
when we
they?
vacate that, the underlying property owners, and so when we vacate our easement, all those rights go back to those property owners.
So it goes through several property owners.
depending on where that, correct, because it could cross a number of different properties.
Yeah, yeah.
Wherever they own that property, would go back to that particular property owner.
That's fine, that's one no, okay, thank you. Any objections? Mark, you have your card up?
Oh, I'm sorry, yes.
Okay. Seeing none, thank you, Dan.
Thanks, Dan. With your approval, Commissioners, we'll move all of these items to this Thursday's consent agenda. Is that okay?
Yep.
Great, thank you. Back to the agenda. Advisory boards and commission appointments. You have quite a few, including the return of leaders of equity, diversity, and inclusion at your request. Mary, would you please go over each one?
Yes, do we want to consider these one at a time, or did we just want to read them all through?
One at a time or all together, Commissioners?
Let's do one at a time.
Okay.
Okay. We're going to start with the Leaders for Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Council, staffed by Equity and Inclusion Office. Currently has 3 openings on their commission due to term expirations. 19 members are allowed with 3-year terms. The recommendation is Mike Foley for a second full term, Cassie Wilson for a first full term, and Lori Bender for a first full term. And that's the first one.
Commissioners, any objections to any of this? I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
Seconded.
Commissioner Savas has moved the appointment for the Equity, Diversity, and Inclusion Council, and Commissioner Scholl has seconded. Any further comments? Hearing none, Mary, please take the poll.
Yes. Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Commissioner Schull,
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 4-0. Up next?
The next one we've got is the Board of Property Tax Appeals, staffed by the Clackamas County Clerk's Office. Currently has 5 openings on their commission due to term expirations. 8 members are allowed with 1-year terms, of which the Board of Property Tax Appeals only meets February through April of the year. The recommendation is as follows: Vicki Pounds, 10 terms; William Spencer, 19 terms; Darrell McCarthy, 14 terms; Richard Deach, 6 terms; and James Stalcup, 5 terms.
Any comments on this? I'll entertain a motion.
I
So
move.
moved. Sorry.
I move to approve the Board of Property Tax Appeals appointments.
Commissioner Fisher has seconded that motion, thank you.
Oh, I thought they were fighting over it, so
Yeah,
I didn't
well, I
want to
didn't know. I
intrude.
thought I'd let you in on the action.
Oh, thanks.
Commissioner Scholl has made a motion to approve the Property Tax Appeals Board, second by Commissioner Fisher.
Man.
Any other comments? Seeing none, Mary, please take the poll.
Commissioner Savas,
Aye.
Commissioner Schull,
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher,
Aye.
Chair Smith.
Aye, motion passes 4-0. Up next.
Okay. Next one that I have is the Clackamas County Fair Board, staffed by the Clackamas County Fairgrounds and Event Center. Currently has 2 openings on their board due to term expirations. 7 members are allowed with 3-year terms. The recommendations is as follows: Raylene Kmeyer, 4th-year term, and Shirley Briney, 2nd-year term. And that's it for this list.
Hey, I just have a question.
Yes.
Were these, in the past, members of the Fair Board were interviewed? Did the interview process go forward this time? Or is this just, how
I
are these
think it's
recommendations come to us?
this is a reappointment, so I didn't do it.
Okay.
So,
Normally, we do bring it to you, and I don't remember what happened this time. I thought maybe we asked you earlier, and these were reappointments, and you said it was
Okay,
okay.
then we probably did.
Yeah.
I
So,
just, I
we
didn't,
had-
I remember Raylene's name, I didn't remember.
we had an appointment that we approved of for the remaining seat on the Fair Board. I believe we appointed the 7th member early fall.
Okay.
That's true, yes.
Yeah, and we did not interview him.
No, normally you do interview, so
Yeah, well, I mean, it's fine.
if you want to hold it, we can confirm what happened. or-
No, I am good going.
Okay,
I
good.
just wasn't sure what our process was, and
And it does say on their matrix that these are both
Yeah.
reappointments.
Okay, I will entertain a motion.
so moved.
Second.
Commissioner Fisher has moved the appointment of the Clackamas County Fair Board, and it's been seconded by Commissioner Savas. Any other comments?
The only comment I would make is that we have been somewhat inconsistent on some of our committee appointment processes. So I just want to just point that out, that there's validity to what Commissioner Fisher is saying.
Some of them we interview for the boards, and some of them we don't. I think what I have observed since I've been here is that it's been brought before us, gee, do you want to interview this for this or not? We say yay or nay, but it has been fairly inconsistent. I don't know if anybody else even applied for this, to be honest with you. So,
Yeah, it's all good.
How about we talk about it at your retreat to confirm, we do come before you about once a year or so, we haven't done it in a while, which advisory boards you want to interview and which you don't. So we'll just set the standard at the start of each year, so we'll do that with you in January.
okay, Gary. Is there a motion? There's a motion on the table, yes. Mary, take the poll, please.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Commissioner Savas?
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl?
Aye.
Chair Smith?
Aye, motion passes 4-0. Thank you, Gary.
And we have one more, Chair.
We
We have
do?
the Community Action Board, staffed by Social Services. It currently has 2 openings in the private sector and 1 opening in the low-income sector on their commission due to term expirations and resignations. 9 members are allowed with 3-year terms. The recommendations for members are as follows. Juana Hernandez, first term. Mara Kudry, first term. Stephanie Hollingshead, first term. They also have recommendations for alternates, which are Paul Edgar, first term, and Eric Brill, first term. And that's the end of this list.
Any comments?
Move for approval?
Second.
Commissioner Savas has moved for approval of the Community Action Board, staffed by Social Services. Commissioner Fisher has seconded the motion. Any further discussions? Hearing none, please call the poll.
Commissioner Savas?
Aye.
Commissioner Scholl?
Aye.
Commissioner Fisher?
Aye.
Chair Smith?
Aye, motion passes 4-0.
That's the end of the list, Chair.
Thank you.
Thanks, Mary. Next on the agenda, Supportive Housing Services Quarter 1 Report. We have staff from Health, Housing, Human Services and the Housing Authority to give a quick update. There was a memo in your packet. So come on down, Rod Cook and Vahid Brown. If you can keep this to around 20 minutes, please, and if we need more time, we'll have to push it to next week.
Okay. Then I'll quickly introduce our resident expert, Vahid Brown. I think you're familiar with him. This is a Quarter 1 report that was submitted to Metro, and Vahid's team pretty much put together all these details, all the details that are in here, the data points. So I'll just have him speak to it, and if you have any questions of us or comments or edits or anything you want for future pieces, we'd be willing to take all that information.
Thank you, Rod. Good morning, Chair Smith and Commissioners. I'm Vahid Brown with the Housing Authority of Clackamas County. Provide a brief update on or overview of the quarterly progress report or quarterly report for supportive housing services that we will be doing every quarter for the next 10 years of the progress of this measure and its implementation in Clackamas County, both to the Board of County Commissioners and to the Regional Oversight Committee. It will come to you first, and then we will present it to the Regional Oversight Committee subsequent in each of the quarters. So we will be presenting this report to the Regional Oversight Committee in January, our first quarterly report. So it was originally scheduled to be in November, but things got moved and holidays, and it ended up being pushed to January. We've also worked with PGA to kind of align the reporting work that we're doing in our team on the supportive housing services implementation around the quarterly reports with a newsletter that will go out to the community. We've had our first newsletter issued as well just this last month. Well, actually, it came out December 1. So we'll be providing updates to the public and to the community about the progress with our implementation as well, kind of key to these metrics. Our quarterly reports will provide information to the board and to the Regional Oversight Committee as well as the public about our expenditures, our progress towards our goals and our local implementation plan. And each quarterly report will look ahead to the balance of the year to speak to subsequent quarters in those fiscal years and what we plan to do in terms of further implementation of the local implementation plan and starting next fiscal year of the annual plan. We'll also be doing an annual work plan for the supportive housing services measure every year. The information in this quarterly report, I think, is broadly and deeply familiar to the commissioners. I mean, most of the developments and exciting progress that we've made has come to you and been approved in the form of contracts that you've considered and approved to move the work forward. But I can give a very brief overview. respecting the time of the commission. The report provides some introduction and background on the measure, on the nature of the report. We discuss in the first quarter program initiation, kind of focusing on the stabilization of existing programs. As we're all familiar, the focus of the initial quarter of the Supportive Housing Services program was to identify term-limited or at-risk programs that were going to be losing funding, and that if they lost their funding, folks in those programs would become homeless, so they would return to homelessness. That includes the Serenity and Haven House programs that we are funding in partnership with Community Corrections that provide mental health transitional stabilization housing for folks exiting the criminal justice system who would be exiting to homelessness and have severe and persistent mental illness, as well as the motel shelter program that was stood up under COVID to provide non-congregate shelter for people that were at risk of severe disease if they were exposed to COVID-19. Those programs are maintained, so that's good news. Those are all critical emergency, kind of basically emergency shelter programs that are continuing. And the board also approved that and this report describes the board's approval of American Rescue Plan Act dollars for the support of the motel program and the leveraging of that investment to expand SHS implementation in the subsequent quarter. So we will be in the next quarter. So we'll be using that leveraged investment to expand our programs, and new contracts will be issued. We'll be coming back to you in the next quarter with a new round of program offers that we will be advancing the goals of the plan. In the first quarter, the contracts for the stabilization of those shelter programs amounted to approximately $1.5 million, amounted to 63 units of emergency shelter. Our plan, our local implementation plan for year one had a goal of 65, so this is fantastic progress towards that goal. And in the first quarter, those two programs provided shelter assistance to 140 households, 135 of whom were identified as the most vulnerable in our community as population A, according to this program. So we are also on track to, we are required by the measure to focus our investments on the most vulnerable folks experiencing homelessness, population A, as defined by the measure. The report then describes the program expansions that we've embarked upon in this quarter, the second quarter. Primarily it looks like a $2.4 million contract value with 5 providers to provide housing navigation and placement services for folks that were sheltering in the non-congregate motel shelter, for people who are on term limited rent assistance from the Emergency Solutions COVID grant that would be expiring for some of those households now or months ago, and they are continuing to receive support and maintain their stable housing, as well as supportive services case management for folks who will receive rent assistance from our program and who require additional assistance to be successful in their housing, wraparound services, in other words. Those services are being provided by 5, as I said, partners in the community. 2 of them are new to Clackamas County. Both of those 2 are culturally specific agencies, so that furthers our plan goal to expand our culturally specific services in Clackamas County, which we had next to very, very little in the county before. And now we have 2 new great agencies doing this work in the county, Greater New Hope Family Services and El Programa Hispano Católico. And those will serve about 102 households with navigation and placement, moving folks from homelessness or shelter into permanent housing, and 205 households with supportive services. And that 205 supportive services households, those households with long-term rent assistance who are receiving case management, that kind of counts as a permanent supportive housing unit. And our goal in year one was 250. So we've gotten 205 of 250 in our program expansion up to date. So this is all fantastic progress. And then our report speaks to system expansion in the third and fourth quarter. It speaks to the need to expand our team. So we're bringing on some new staff into the supportive housing services team and the regional long-term rent assistance team. Right now there are 5 staff at the Housing Authority on the supportive housing services team, including myself, and 3 staff on the regional long-term rent assistance program that are providing the rent assistance vouchers. And we have approval from the board to add 4 staff to the Supportive Housing Services team in this fiscal year, as well as to expand as needed the regional long-term rent assistance team. That's basically housing occupancy specialists. So it's a good news Q1 report. We've made a lot of progress towards the goals in our plan. We've got new partners in the community providing culturally specific services. We have stabilized critical programs that we were able to stand up with one-time limited dollars during the COVID emergency, and those households are now on their way to permanent housing as opposed to returning to the sidewalks and the woods. So this is our first quarter.
Good, awesome. I knew there would be questions. Commissioner Savas, your part is.
Yeah, thanks, Vahid, for your presentation. As I review the material, and I know this is a Q1 report, so I'm thoroughly aware of that. And I guess it's okay, don't have any quarrel with it, to mention, as you pointed out here on, I think it's page 10 or 11 here of the presentation, roll that up here, where you point out some of the Q2 fiscal year 22 contracts, which are actually being funded, like for example, the housing placement that you spoke to.
Yep.
And the navigation and all that, short-term. So those are fiscal year 22, but they're actually really Q2 expenditures and authorization. But at the very top of that page, you mentioned the SHA's funding advance of $3 million, which is correct. We did that in Q1. But it might be, maybe if we put an asterisk, because you covered those other programs in the fiscal year 22 contracts that are being paid for with the other $2 million, it might be just put just suggestion of maybe an asterisk in the report that we've actually advanced the 5, or we use the 5 of the advance, only because there's some intermixing there. And I also, one other suggestion would be where you list the contracts that went out to some of the providers, and I know it's embedded in one of the pages here at the top of page 6. For example, you mentioned the 29 households with the 29 individual contracts. Granted, there's not one nonprofit provider, but at the top of page 5, you lift those. It'd be nice if there was a bullet saying, and also with 29 additional, just so we don't, there's a full breadth there of everything that we're providing. Just seems to provide some balance there. You included all that for the most part, but it'd be nice if it was kind of organized just a little bit better. Other than that, I'm glad that we're able to do this, and I'm certainly looking forward to that, getting that IGA signed here hopefully shortly, so we can make the next steps and start ramping up the program to the desired amount.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Any comments for Commissioner Savas?
No, thank you, Commissioner.
Fisher, thank you.
Okay, my
Commissioner
list.
Fisher, you're up.
Homeless count is happening. Do you know what we're doing?
Yeah, thank you, Commissioner Fisher. The Clackamas County does a biannual homeless count required by HUD, and we do that on the odd-numbered years. So our next HUD-required homeless count would have been in 2023. However, we are doing a count in January, next month, goodness gracious, of people experiencing homelessness in coordination with Multnomah and Washington County, and the partner that is on contract with Multnomah County, Portland State University.
Portland what?
Portland State University. They're providing staff support, and they will support the production of a report about the regional count. So this is a new thing. It's specific to the Supportive Housing Services implementation. It was recognized that there was a desire for a baseline count of a regional look at the numbers of people experiencing unsheltered homelessness. So it's a subset of what we would normally do in Clackamas County on our biannual count, which, as the board is familiar, the biannual count that we do as required by HUD, Clackamas County has typically done an additional range of households included in that count who are at risk of experiencing homelessness that are not required to be counted by HUD, if that makes sense. So HUD says you have to count people who are living on the street and living in shelter, And our local report has also counted school children who are at risk of homelessness, who are experiencing homelessness through our homeless liaisons in the school system, as well as people who are at risk of homelessness who identify as such through their interaction with food banks and things like this. So it's the doubled up population as well. So this regional count is a count strictly looking for a regional baseline number of the number of people in our region, the region being served by the Supportive Housing Services measure, of unsheltered and sheltered people experiencing homelessness. So it'll be a smaller effort, you might say, than what is typical of our biannual count. In Clackamas County, the HUD requires that you conduct the pit count for 1 week. The count that we've done historically has been conducted for 3 weeks in order to kind of identify those doubled up households and the school children through the McKinney-Vento program, the homeless liaisons. So we're doing a shorter count, we're going to identify folks in the camps, folks who are going to the Clackamas Service Center and the Father's Heart and the food banks, and folks who are receiving shelter services in any of our shelter programs.
Okay. But it won't go outside the urban growth
It will.
boundary? Oh, it will, so we'll capture people like on Mount Hood or?
It will be a
Essex
countywide
Haven?
count, yes.
Oh, good.
Yep.
Okay, so that will be really useful, and we'll be able to better, we know the need based on the calls and requests for service, but not necessarily through the count, so it'll give us some more good data. I'm assuming.
Yes.
Thinking that it'll be helpful to us. Okay, my next question, you talked about staffing. I'm happy to hear that there'll be 4 new staff that will be provided. What is a housing occupancy specialist?
A housing occupancy specialist is, that's the classification for folks in the housing authority. There's folks who have been doing that for decades in the housing authority with HUD programs like Section 8 or the Housing Choice Voucher. It is someone who works with a household who will be receiving a voucher on their application, making sure that they are eligible, their income verification stuff. It's all the kind of the bureaucratic paperwork stuff. Mm-hmm. And then working, our housing occupancy specialists in the Regional Long-Term Rent Assistance Program are fully integrated with our team and our providers. So we have regular meetings with our providers where we match households that say someone's in a motel room, they're going to get a Regional Long-Term Rent Assistance voucher. A provider is going to help them find an apartment. Our occupancy specialist is working with the provider and the household to make sure their paperwork is together, their packet is complete, they're issued the voucher, their unit is inspected, the landlord contract.
They're the get-her-done person.
Yep, they're awesome.
Behind the scenes.
They house the people.
Who does the developing the relationships with the housing? Is that through the providers then?
Yeah, that will be, so that's done by all of us. So that's that's a team effort. Everyone who's working in housing navigation and placement needs that back pocket list, right, of all of the providers in the community that they can look to for vacancies. Housing Authority also does that, but the Regional Long-Term Rent Assistance team is also hiring a landlord liaison in this fiscal year.
So that's a huge need
Yep.
for the system. And then my last question, as far as expanding, which I know you talk about that in quarters 3 and 4. Is there anything that you need now to get ready to expand for 3 and 4? Is there anything that should be on the board's radar as far as what's our decision points?
I mean, gosh.
And maybe you can answer that later. You don't have to, I don't want to put you on the spot.
I think our biggest constraint is that we have a small team doing a large task. It's a lot of work to house the people and end chronic homelessness. But we have a really dedicated team that are really hardworking. And so I will look to the county administrator and the board for support in expanding the team as needed. And that's...
Okay, the team and then the contracts.
Yep.
And my understanding is we have pretty good bones of a system, the infrastructure of a system based with the allocations, and we can build on what we have moving forward.
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Schull.
Yes, thanks for all your hard work. You said that there's an annual SHS plan due to Metro. When's that due? And before you answer, is that based on fiscal year?
Yes.
Okay. And when's that due? And how do you go about doing a plan with the current uncertainty of the funding from SHS dollars?
So the reporting and the timing of the reporting is still, those will all be elements in the intergovernmental agreement, the IGA that we're negotiating. So I don't have an answer yet, final. The final answer to when it will be due, when the next fiscal year's annual plan and the time frame, whether it's 45 days after or before. So that's a point of, that's an item in the IGA that is being negotiated. So once that is completed, that will identify the timeline for when quarterly reports must be turned in, when annual plan reports must be done. But it's coming up, so we'll have to have an annual plan for the coming fiscal year before July 1. And we have also, as a part of the negotiations with the 3 counties and Metro, some dedicated work towards developing a process and a system for regular, professional, financial, what's the word? I'm not a financeologist. Projections following the forecasting. So Metro and the 3 counties will have expertise kind of coming together to forecast revenues and to provide that on a regular basis to all 4 counties, all 4 program teams. So we will have a solid basis, I think, to make the best guess that we can on an annual revenue. And we will also be in a position to start the next fiscal year with a significant amount. If the current revenue estimates are correct, I anticipate that there will be a significant amount of revenue that will allow us to start fiscal year 2 with kind of a full program lean in, and that will be our kind of, this is our build year, and year 2 will be our kind of full year.
Okay, well, thank you. That's exciting. I'm anxious to see that plan, and I'm anxious to be part of it also. Thank you.
Mr. Savas.
Yeah, I'm not sure if that's what Fahid was referencing, but I saw a fascinating email from Metro staff as far as that forecasting of what next year looks like, the calendar year, as far as the revenue flow. And, it looks like maybe spring, they used the word conservative, they had a very conservative approach, and we're very reluctant to think it's going to be greater, or perhaps suggesting, because the revenues have been way below anticipated amounts, it seems they're pretty reserved. So that might be a good read for you. One thing I forgot to mention, back to the PowerPoint, page 10 of the PowerPoint, the second paragraph, just want to make sure, maybe if there's a hang-up, I want to make sure it's corrected. But it reads that the second paragraph, the Board of County Commissioners committed to taking up to $5 million, and we did. And both Jill and Rod made a plea here, and we approved taking the full $2 million additional past the 3. But the way it's worded here, the last sentence of this second paragraph says $3 million of this advance was received to fund the program beginning in the first quarter. I just want to make sure that we did receive the $2 million we authorized, that there was no hang-up.
That is correct.
Okay. Yeah, maybe an asterisk there might show, because the reader might think that maybe we've only taken 3 of the 5 when we already authorized taking the full 5 at this point. Is that accurate?
Yeah,
Okay.
yep.
Yeah.
I got you.
That's all I have.
Okay, any other questions for the presenters? Thank you very much for this report.
Thank you for your support.
You bet, thank you.
Thank you.
The email was sent out in a question, I believe, from Commissioner Fisher on how the state predicts funds, and then we had a report back from the Supported Housing Services folks, and that was a very interesting email that came through
And
this
was
week.
that yesterday?
Oh, yeah.
Because I'm just now looking at it.
That was from you, Elizabeth, in part.
Elizabeth sent it.
Yeah, it was very interesting. very interesting, so thank you. Gary?
All right, thank you. Next quick update. So the Hoodland Park District formation, we have confirmed that the signatures were submitted, they were verified, they met the threshold, so staff is preparing, coming before you for a public hearing to get the process moving forward, so.
All right, good to know.
Happening. Thank you, Stephen, for that update. Next on your agenda, we're pulling the supplemental budget request. There was a small hiccup with the noticing requirements, so we're going to do this the first business meeting in January. So we're just on hold. It can all wait until then. But Elizabeth, we will need it on next week's issues because the board, that gives them 2 weeks' notice since they're on recess. So moving forward, Park Avenue project update. Very quickly, I will give this. So commissioners, when you last discussed the Park Avenue project, you recall that you decided not to move forward until the community came back to you with some sort of consensus on some of the items that there were some controversy over in the community. That has still not occurred. The community has not come forward with any form of consensus. I'm the one who recommended, so people can blame or thank me, that perhaps the McLaughlin Area Plan Implementation Team, or MAPIT, could reform and be the venue to have that discussion. MAPIT is still not meeting. It is not meeting as a group right now. Perhaps the Community Advisory Committee that was formed could reform, or the CPOs could advise what they'd like to do. But basically, I'm looking to the community to tell us, tell you, board, how they'd like to move forward. If there's something staff can do to support that, I'm open to that. But it's really, we're on pause. I just want to do that check-in back with you, commissioners, that staff's doing no further work on this project until the community comes back to you with what they'd like to do. So, Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, Gary, you had this on the agenda here a couple, 3 weeks ago. I guess it just, one thing or another got forgotten or left off, so I appreciate you bringing this back. I just want to clarify a few things because I know there's a lot of people that want to come back to the table. I don't want them to think that you're suggesting that they're not willing to when most of them are.
Right.
But the way the bylaws are written for MAPIT, if one of the groups does not come to the table, they can't really have a meeting. So I want to make sure you know that there are a lot of people that do want to come with the exception of one CPO. So I thought by now that they mentioned August, that they would get back together when they decided to stop meeting earlier this year, but they have not. So I don't, Gary, I guess not to push you because you can't. I know that a number of them have made overtures to you, and you've been in contact with them that they're willing to meet. The principle in which the MAPIT was formed, I don't have that language in front of me, but I was going to look for it. But on our website, there is, where it describes MAPIT, there is there's a page dedicated to the principle of which MAPIT was formed and how we came to agreements. And MAPIT is specifically spelled out on the county website. So perhaps we can find that page maybe and circulate it to those people that you've been in contact with, CPOs and MABA and all those. But I do know they're still interested in this. I still have interest in this, and we don't want it to die. But we certainly need to honor our commitment that we've made, which is spelled out on our website, and the community needs to honor their end of that commitment, which is also on the same page that I'm referencing on the website. And I believe that thing dates back to 2013. That's how long it's been in existence. So we have an 8-year standing running investment of the county and the community on this program, and so hopefully we can get in a good place.
Commissioner Fisher?
Thanks. I would really hate to see this die too. There was so much work that went into this, and there was a suggestion by staff to sort of thread the needle on the business concerns and the community concerns, which was kind of last minute. The community didn't suggest it, and that was kind of our hope, is that they would be community driven. But if they aren't able to reconvene under whatever method, is there a way that we could bring this back as a board and maybe have some public comment, look at staff's recommendation of how to thread that needle and move forward with this and send it to the Planning Commission? Is that a possibility?
You could do anything you wish. That staff spent a considerable amount of time on this project for several years. And this board and the prior board always said the community will help drive this process. And there were, in my memory, 2 sticking points that the community just couldn't come to an agreement on. So that kind of puts you in a bind, that knowing the community is not aligned on what they'd like to see happen here.
Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, I think what Commissioner Fisher is referring to, and I agree, that June meeting we had this year, it was option 2, which was what staff was that thread the needle option, which is option 2 if you look at the packet from June. I did find the page, so I'm going to read you the page. So I think it's noteworthy just to read this. So it's at the top of our county website page. It says Statement of Purpose, McLaughlin Area Plan Implementation Team, dated January 16th, 2013, shortly after Commissioner Smith and Ludlow took office. The purpose of the MAPIT Committee, McLaughlin Area Plan Implementation Team, is to serve as a task force working with the McLaughlin area community as well as Clackamas County staff, where appropriate, to identify and set priorities for projects and programs recommended in the MAP 2 report while ensuring that they incorporate the visions, values, principles adopted in the MAP 1 framework plan. In order for this effort to succeed, any recommendations from this task force will need to be reviewed and approved by the entire community, probably through polling as well as at a community-wide open house. After those have taken place, any modifications required will be made before the final recommendations of the task force are presented to the Clackamas County Board of Commissioners for their consideration and possible action. I'm not done, but I want to note that last few sentences there is key, because in essence, there is somewhat of a modification by the work of the Park Avenue project. We recognize that financial constraints may require that many of our recommendations cannot be implemented for a considerable period of time. However, we believe that having an identifiable set of community-supported goals for our area may help to serve as a guide for current and future county planning and budgetary decisions. Our intent is to reduce demands on county staff by focusing questions on these issues to our committee where possible, rather than asking staff to deal with what can, at times, be numerous requests from different individuals for information or actions on the same items. That's another significant one, too, and I'm in recognizing staff's commitment and their efforts that they put out. Where appropriate, we hope that staff would consider using us as a resource in their dealings with the communities represented on our committee or in other capacity as needed. 3 individual CPOs represent our committee as well as McLaughlin Area Business Alliance and will continue to function as before. We hope that their representatives on the task force will keep them updated on our actions and will return to our meetings with suggestions from their constituents. Lots said there, but it's powerful. It's a commitment. We put it in writing. They agreed. We worked with them. I think we, again, need to abide by all of that. And again, I want to thank staff. They have put out a lot in these years, and I think really some of the op-eds I know that they have heard from a particular group of folks have kind of disparaged our efforts and our staff. And I think that there's, hopefully we can build and get everyone back together in a cooperative way. And I think that's something I'm happy to, support. And if you don't know anything about that, I'm happy to inform any questions you might have on some of the tensions that are out there.
Well, what about us just bringing it back and digging a little bit deeper into threading that needle option and then sending it to the Planning Commission to do the final work on it?
Yeah, I suggested that to Gary.
I would be in favor of that.
That at the right time, but I think this is one last effort. Gary's suggestion is to make this one last effort. If it doesn't, I'm on board.
Okay, so we have 2 commissioners wanting to bring it back. I'm sure we might have consensus with the rest of us.
So please let me, I'll reach out to the community folks who used to be part of MAPIT. Let me do that first. I want to remind you that you already authorized DTD staff. This is not part of the long-range planning program. So if you choose to bring this back, you have to take something off your long-range planning program. This is significant. So that will be the next step you'll have to take before you do any further outreach on this. So let me start by reaching out to the community. If I can work with them to come together, then let them drive this. Please let me do that first, and I'll report back to you.
Yeah, and thank you, Gary. The only thing I would add, Commissioner Fisher, is when you read this, you'll realize, that statement, our purpose, I don't want to violate our intent and our commitment.
Yeah, and you've been in the weeds on this, I have not. I just understand that the community had concerns, and the business community had concerns, and staff had a way to meet everyone's concerns, put a frame on that, and that's what I'm hoping we could get to.
Yeah,
and-
I don't know.
and do our work.
You're right. I think that the attempt was to meet all those different concerns, but we never vetted that.
Right, we didn't vet it,
Yeah, and that's the piece that I want to see.
but it could be vetted at the planning commission level. And that's what the board was hesitant to do. The better option seemed to bring the community back together, which made sense. But if not, it's worth pursuing because of all of the effort, the years of collaboration and work and visioning and.
Yeah, I would encourage you, Commissioner Fisher, to take a look at that statement and go line by line, and I'm happy to point out to you a couple things that are really critical in that commitment.
All right, I'll report back to you, commissioners. I'm mindful of time, you have 20 minutes left. So next, business meeting agenda for this Thursday, December 9th, 2021. It's an evening business meeting, 6 PM. COVID updates, we're removing the public hearing on the supplemental budget, I just mentioned that. You have a long consent agenda, and then public communication, and that's it. If you have any questions on any item, please let me know. Next, Chair Smith, would you like to discuss the tolling op-ed
Yeah,
draft?
Commissioners, you have in your packet, it was sent out yesterday. This is an op-ed piece written by staff in follow-up to the town hall we had regarding tolling. Keeping the information out there, and basically it says, residents have really weighed in on this, and it's a document that we can all sign. If you would like, if not, I made an edit. I don't see that it got on here. I wanted to add one sentence at the end of paragraph 2, how tolling came about. I wanted to say that tolling was approved by the Oregon Legislature in House Bill 2017 in, I believe, the year 2017. That's where the tolling authority came from. Tolling authority came from the Oregon Legislature to separate us from the decision that was made to make it clear yet again. If we want to go through with that, I think, Kimberly, you're writing down for me. Thank you. Yeah, and it's just real simple. Just make sure that I'm accurate in what I'm saying.
Well, and it was called value pricing, I believe, or congestion pricing. What was the term that they used, Paul?
There's 4 of them, yeah.
But it wasn't-
Congestion pricing, variable pricing,
Yeah.
and variable.
As we move forward today.
Value pricing, yeah, variable, value, congestion, and tolling.
Oh, they did say actually tolling in it.
Oh, yeah.
I remember the congestion pricing, but.
Yeah, so, Commissioner Savas.
Yeah, so there's a couple errors in that. I did read it. There's a couple errors.
Where?
I don't have it with me right now. But I thought my goal here today was to make sure we vet this through the team that meets every week on this topic.
And what team is that?
And we meet every Monday. We met remember last Monday when we met with our DTD staff?
So this is.
And actually, Commissioner Scholl participated yesterday. You participated last week for a significant amount of time.
Well.
I want to make sure that we vet it through them because there are some errors in there. And they were, I think, even yesterday, we didn't know about this until the beginning of the meeting. So we were kind of caught off guard. I want to make sure that all the departments are working together on this. And we come up with something because, yeah, it's important that, as confusing as this is, that we don't add to it. But I caught at least one error in there, and I think maybe our staff should, again, that team that's working on this, as delicate as all this is, that we get this right.
Oops. Okay, point out the errors, go through that, Kimberly. Are you the lead on this? Commissioner Fisher?
I think it would be good, not that I'm micromanaging anything, but I don't know that anybody's going to be very interested in reading this because if there's a way to just draw people into the story of one of the constituents that talked and just make it a little bit more alive if it truly is an op-ed. I mean, it reads to me more like a letter of concern to go to ODOT, which is important and we need to speak in one voice. The piece that I think resonates when you talk to people who live in this community, is like, oh my gosh, how am I gonna go anywhere? Oh, well, I think it was it Angela Nyland who said, I won't be going to the doctor, I won't be going to, we have different communities, but we cross over when we have that one bridge, well, we have two bridges, but Abernathy, which it really divides, would be very divisive, and it destroys community. I mean, I think the way that it's so, the disparities of how this would affect Clackamas County versus what would ever happen in Portland, because as Commissioner Savas has said, there's not a grid system. You can't go an alternate route. The few alternate routes are already extremely challenged, which is Stafford Road and the Oregon City Bridge. I mean, and through West Lynn, it's just, so if there is going to be an op-ed, I would really encourage it to just tell the story, the Clackamas County story. What does this mean to the people that live here?
Why don't you give your input to the folks? Paul will give his input. Mark, you give your input on this going out. I will say, staff did say they wanted to keep this in the news, so I think maybe we're trying to get it done. They hope to do it next week, but maybe, whatever. If you don't want to do it, you don't want to do it.
No, I think it's really important. And I do think that the people that participated, they went to a public forum, they could be quoted and all.
There were some very valuable quotes. I have pages and pages and pages
Yes.
of notes. And I'm going to be talking to someone today referring to those notes and what they said. The group of people that testified or showed up at this town hall were very educated. We had a lawyer, we had a doctor, we had healthcare, we had a traffic engineer, we had the general manager of Clackamas Town Center who said basically that'll be a ghost town if this goes through. We had learned people, one after another, who came and gave very pertinent, I think, intelligent information. You're right. Absolutely, you're right on that.
So telling the story, it's important.
Yeah, overall, I thought it was well done. I want to thank staff, all the staff that helped make that happen. Dylan was awesome as usual. Good job on that, but I think it went swimmingly.
Swimmingly. Okay, good. So let's
jolly good.
continue the work on this. People, add your comments on this, and when it's ready, it can go out. I'm assuming all commissioners want to sign on this. It's up to you folks. Martha needs to look at it. She'll be back next week, so. Okay, Gary.
All right, thank you. Finally, Commissioner Communications.
Okay, who's up first?
Yeah, I'd be happy to say something. First, I'd like to remind everybody out there that 80 years ago this morning, the Japanese Imperial Fleet attacked the U.S. Pacific Fleet at Pearl Harbor, and that's something we should never forget, that liberty, the cost of it, is eternal vigilance. Vigilance today and tomorrow. I'd like to make a few comments about the Oregon Business Plan Leadership Conference yesterday that I attended. It was very interesting. And for those who didn't see it, I think you can find some slides and information on OregonBusinessPlan.org. But a couple of things really stuck out yesterday. One, the need for commercial lands, the need for residential lands is a common problem and something that we need to work on in Clackamas County. We've talked about it before. The other thing, too, is that some of the goals yesterday were very reminiscent of our Performance Clackamas. And so it was very interesting to see that we are doing some good things in Clackamas County. We are attracting business, but there's more that we can do to attract new business to Clackamas County. So that was very interesting. Thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Salas.
Yeah, we talked about the tolling, so that went great. I agree. That was that one particular panel with the business owners and the one gentleman from Albany who was the economic development manager. I thought that was just a great panel. I thought their insights, and for Commissioner Scholl, you're the newest commissioner, but way back, 10, 11 years ago, 12 years ago, even farther back, before I got here, employment lands were a big deal. And we kind of really saw the need. And if we don't, I've said this before, but I'll just say it in a different way. If we don't increase the employment opportunities everywhere, commercial and industrial, if we don't increase that at the rate our population is growing, we will, that's a recipe for poverty, because you got to have the jobs, the employment, or else people won't have the means to pay their rent. And we are adding the homes faster than we're adding the jobs. And that's a recipe, that's part of the recipe, that's part of the problem that we've had, let alone the fact that we don't have enough housing or land to build housing on as well. So you have multiple things that the common denominator is really the land, is having the land and the ease. And you also heard the comments about wetlands. Oregon's a wet state. There's a lot of land that happens to be wet, and there's a lot of challenges, regulations, and delays on development because of just wetlands and how that's navigated in a land use processes across the state. But I thought it was great.
Okay. Commissioner.
Yeah, along with this conversation, the part that really stood out to me was how every part of our lives are becoming digitized, and the importance of manufacturing those chips, and just how that whole industry has evolved over time, and the United States has a much smaller part of that market, which most of it is in Oregon. And I suppose, I've kind of known that, but I hadn't really known it in context of the whole global picture. So the work that Senator Wyden and is happening at the federal level and maybe also Senator Merkley, to really highlight the importance of that industry for the United States is pretty significant, because that is the future, and the investment there is really important. So that was really interesting, such an interesting presentation from the CEO of Intel. Okay, so I was in Atlanta for it's called PN to 3, Prenatal to 3 Leadership Academy. And it was a group of, there might have been about 20, 25 leaders from across the country that did an in-depth dive and a lot of collaboration and sharing and talking about what do we do about supporting everything from pregnant mothers through 3 years old, and even a little bit above, because of the workforce issues regarding childcare, which is such a national problem. We're not going to get to recovery unless we have a safe and affordable place for children to go during the day. It is really came home. We hear it here in Clackamas County and in Oregon, but it is such a national problem. It's a very, very deep concern. So that was a real highlight. The other thing after that event, and there were so many resources about different funding streams that might be available for capacity building. A lot of talk about what the other counties are doing with ARPA dollars. I kept asking the question. I said, because one county, oh my gosh, they were just going for, we're going to fund all this right now, and we know it's not sustainable, and we're going to hit the cliff. There's going to be a cliff, and then we're just going to have to figure out what to do, because this is so important that we have to do it. We just have to do it. And I'm like, oh my gosh, how could you possibly do that? It's like, I would be so uncomfortable using dollars to create a cliff, because we don't have the services. It just seems so foreign to me to do that. But the conversations were really good. I do not have the answer after all of that. I don't feel comfortable creating a cliff on this issue. I just don't.
The cliff on the service provision side?
You start doing services, and then you don't have but the thought is that, well, the legislature, this is so important, the legislature will step up, or there'll be other funding that will step up to do it, but we've got to start.
Wow.
And a lot of it had to do, and there were a state that didn't have, we have pretty amazing services in Clackamas County with home visiting services and we do a lot of the infrastructure already. This is a state or a county that does not have that capacity built in, and that they feel it is so important that they're going to do that. But I don't know, I think about this, I think about ARPA law, to talk about what the different counties are doing with ARPA, what they want to do with ARPA, and what are they thinking, and how are they addressing this issue. I wish I came back with the answers. I don't have them. But I do know that the Child Care for All group is continuing to meet, and there is a group that was there at this conference that deals with funding. When our Safe Kids Coalition went to them for the Children's Safety Levy, they did not help Clackamas County. I didn't know this, but they didn't help Clackamas County because it was too narrow of a focus, and they would have wanted a broader focus that included childcare. So that might be something to take back to talk with that group, to see if there's some connections there now, to see if they can move that forward. Because what we really need to do is the capacity building in Clackamas County with the childcare deserts, which we have tremendous lack of access, and we have got to build a plan to fill those gaps. So that was the P into 3, and then I stayed for part of the large urban county caucus. We went and did some tours in Atlanta for social service delivery, and you know what? We are so blessed in Oregon. I cannot believe it. They have to do so much charity care for health care because they don't have insurance. Their uninsured rate is like 18% of their population. Our uninsured rate, because I was Googling around, it's like 5% in Oregon. So that amount of effort that they have to do, it was a real wake-up call. Their private, nonprofit, charitable sector fills a huge gap that made me feel really proud to live in Oregon. That was really interesting. It was interesting just being in another place. And I don't know what other people's experiences are with COVID and COVID restrictions, but there are not the restrictions in Georgia. And everywhere I went, mostly in Decatur, but also in Atlanta, people were wearing masks in public indoor spaces, way more than they do here. And so I am thinking, just on that experimental, somebody should study this, is like, do mandates work? Maybe social responsibility when people see, oh my gosh, the Omicron has just come out, we don't want to spread these things, maybe we need to do this. I just felt, just anecdotally, and especially with the conference, with the attendees of all the commissioners for the large Urban County Caucus, there was very much adherence to the protocols. And it was suggested, but not, I don't think there's a mandate in that community. But it could be wrong, those are some anecdotal things. There was a real focus for the large Urban County Caucus on infant mortality. There are tremendous disparities across the country of communities of color with babies dying versus white babies, and that was a big focus. I looked, and Kimberly tried to help me. We tried to find our numbers in Clackamas County by race, and we couldn't find it as of when I was in the conference. But we do know what our infant mortality rate is overall in Oregon, of how many births. And it's something that we definitely need to improve on, and it takes prenatally getting to people when they're, probably before they're pregnant, just for a healthier lifestyle, to deal with better birth outcomes. But that was pretty cool that was a focus. There were a lot of commissioners from all around the large urban county caucus that were there focusing on babies, which was like, wow, this is a real shift of priorities. There's a shift underway. And it was a really interesting time. And I didn't know the large urban county caucus was so incredible for these other events. I really encourage other commissioners, if they do another event, to go for the couple days.
On that child care thing, I wish Commissioner Schrader was here for that, because I think she has a lot of insight on how measures work in this county and how to make them more successful. So
Yeah.
I'm hoping that, it'd be great for her, to have this conversation together to make sure that the county is more involved in
Absolutely.
any
Well,
kind of
it's
effort going forward.
really great with Commissioner Schrader's work on the workforce side of NACO, and then with my work on the human services side, really teeing those up, because, you know what, we can do our organizing here at the local level and build our systems, but we are not going to come up with the dollars. And we don't know if the dollars are going to come from the programs of the federal government. I mean, we will see.
Yeah,
We will see.
She's been advocating for childcare things, and so has the previous commissioners as well. You know,
Yeah.
We talked about it as a commission in the past as well, so it's been on our radar for quite a long time.
Yeah, well, there's nothing like a pandemic to lay it bare when people don't have resources and they can't work. And then they don't go back to work because it's just too cost prohibitive.
Yep. Finished?
Yep.
Thank you for your report. Speaking of the pandemic, I believe Oregon has a 78% vax rate, and we are only one of 4 states in America with a mask mandate. In February, the governor's executive order for the mask mandate will expire, and I believe she's prohibited by law for issuing another mask mandate. Although I think that's why you may be hearing information in the news media of a permanent indoor mask mandate in March. I'm concerned, I'm getting emails on it. We talked about it at the Tri-Chairs meeting last night. I don't know how she alone will do that. Maybe she needs a legislature, maybe she doesn't. I'm prepared to address this in January when the facts shake out on what that would look like. I think I'm getting emails on this, maybe you folks are too. Why is she doing this? I don't know that it's the governor is talking about it. Whether she has any executive order ability left to extend it, I don't know. I'm very concerned about this. I do believe at this point in the pandemic, we're coming on how many years? Other states are managing well without a mandate. I think it should be a choice. I've always advocated choice. If you want to wear a mask, wear a mask. But I think mandates are not really what the people want. I was able to have some information on a statewide poll that was conducted on the mask mandate, and 70% of Oregonians do not support a mask mandate at this point, and that was hot off the press. So I think maybe this board needs to consider that in alignment of the people whom we represent. Think about it. Let's think about, I'd like a report in January what's going on with that. Just want to give you a heads up. So without hearing anything else, are we adjourned today?